Welcome to the Surrogates Corner with James Mahan.
Welcome to the Surrogates Corner. I'm attorney James Mahan, and I advocate for surrogates and donors by helping them understand the legal realities of their journeys and offering legal support when it really matters. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Brian Levine, a top reproductive endocrinologist based in New York, and also the founder of Nodal, a new type of surrogacy matching platform. Together, we're talking about where the surrogacy industry is headed and the insights Dr. Levine can share with us about new trends for clinics, doctors, and agencies in this ever-evolving field. Dr. Levine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to connect.
Great. So I don't know about your industry, but as a lawyer, every law conference I go to always seems to mention AI. I'm super interested in what you're seeing. What impact, if any, is AI having on your REI practice? And Nodal, are you seeing like any advances or efficiencies materialize for you in patients that's sort of new or kind of changing?
So just to understand, we have 12 hours for this podcast, right? Because that's how long it's going to take to discuss
exactly.
AI. In all seriousness, it's funny. I had this quote that I gave at a conference a few months ago, and then it went viral. And, at the end of the day, this is not what I want to be known for, but this quote just seems to be super popular, which is that I said, AI is not going to replace doctors, but doctors who don't embrace AI will be replaced. And I think that's completely true. What we are seeing today is that AI is sneaking into every aspect of reproductive medicine. It's how patients are finding us. They're using ChatGPT or their favorite engine or LLM right now to research their doctor. They're putting their symptoms, they're putting their labs into one of these engines, and they're coming in more empowered, more aware, and more educated about what infertility treatments are. Patients are coming in requesting specific services, even before they've been diagnosed or seen by a doctor. And by the way, that's the AI that happens before they even hit the door.
Right. Yeah.
What we're then seeing in the clinic is that there's a ton of AI companies who are really up against some amazing headwinds, and they're also taking advantage of some amazing tailwinds. What they're doing today in the IVF world is that people are using AI to figure out how to stimulate patients better. Said otherwise, how do you give people medications to have their ovaries grow better quantity and quality of eggs, which we know are directly related to the number of embryos at the end. People are also using AI to figure out in the laboratory, how do we pick the best embryo? People are using AI to actually help you with protocol selection for any of these treatments. And then, of course, there's a really cool AI stuff that's happening. So there's robotic IVF, where we have IVF laboratories that are using AI to actually do the procedures using AI to actually make sure that we're picking the best sperm, putting them together in the best environment and whatnot. And then, of course, there's the AI for what you and I do. Mm-hmm. There's the AI that we're seeing now in surrogacy and donor egg. AI is helping us sift through medical records. AI is helping us make tough decisions easier, which is who's the right candidate and who should we be matching with. And AI is actually creeping its way into the legal profession, where fortunately or unfortunately, it sort of feels like Mad Libs. You need to give a couple prompts, and out comes a document, which, by the way, is legally binding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, that's one of the things that we definitely see is that, I mean, your quote is exactly what they're saying on the legal side is like, if you don't choose to embrace it or include AI in your practice, like you're not going to be around for very long because it's going to create some sort of issue for us in terms of what we can or can't do. That's fascinating stuff, Brian. With how fast medicine and technology is progressing, are you seeing any changes when it comes like the ASRM or ACOG guidelines that we have that either GCs or either need to be aware of when it comes to IVF for pregnancy that might be very different just in the last few years from their most recent pregnancy journeys?
One of my favorite descriptors of me and my practice is that I'm a geek because I embrace technology and I love technology. And what we are seeing today is that practices who are not embracing technology are actually losing patients. Patients want to know that their practices are using technology that makes it both safer and more efficient and more effective in the practice itself. Well, these innovations are actually trickling their way up, I think, right now to ASRM, for example. And so last year, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, or ASRM, at their annual clinical meeting, had a fantastic opportunity for an innovation summit that was directly after the meeting. And during that innovation summit, which was a 1.5-day meeting, we heard about a lot of emerging technologies that are being used today. We are seeing that there's unbelievable technological opportunities in both direct reproductive medicine. We're seeing there's opportunities that are being done for people to have better use of the medications. Of course, we're also seeing better prescribing patterns, better data about how patients respond, and probably we're being more efficient and more effective with patients' dollars. In the end of the day, we know that the entire reproductive journey is expensive. It's physically expensive, right? It hurts to take the shots. It takes 2 weeks to make embryos. It's emotionally expensive, right? It's super upsetting. It's super frustrating. It's a lot of bad news with a whole bit of good news in between. And also it's financially expensive. And so if we can actually help people reduce those costs using technology, I think everyone's going to agree that we're going to end up in a better place than we were.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, couldn't agree more. With what we're seeing in 2026, I saw an interview that you had done, like I think through 2 or 3 years ago, where you're talking about IVF and kind of where it would go. And you were discussing like, if there's one thing you could change about the surrogacy space, what would that be? And I'm just curious, now that we're in 2026 and we're seeing this kind of AI, whether it's a revolution or just a new way of doing things, what kind of changes do you think you would like to see in this surrogacy space, and how would that maybe get implemented in a practical sense?
So up until 2026, if you were to ask me what I think is the most exciting technological innovation in reproductive medicine, I would answer it would be employer-based benefit solutions, meaning that you have insurance that pays for fertility treatments.
Right. Mm-hmm.
In 2026 forward, we know that actually we're talking about real tech here. We're talking about real technologies that are being used. And in the surrogacy space, what I'm hoping that we're going to see is that over this next year, there's a real push to use technology to help us build registries. As you know, in the United States today, it is incredibly hard to track an egg donor or a sperm donor or a surrogate. However, technology such as AI will afford us that ability to do both longitudinal studies to understand who someone is and to take a look at their health history, and to also do broader studies to actually look at, has this donor done it before? Do we see other cycles from this donor? Think blockchain. Think the way that cryptocurrency works today. You can still protect patients' privacy while still reporting data. And what I'm hoping that we're going to see is that technology will afford us the ability to not only track donors, but to help us limit the number of donor cycles. Because as you know, one of the biggest issues that we have in America is that we have super donors, people who've done multiple rounds of egg donation, people who've done multiple rounds of sperm donation. And so I'm hoping that technology will be harnessed so actually we can limit these super donors and we actually can help protect patients and the unborn.
Kind of with that, tell me a little bit about Nodal. I know when it first came onto the space, it was kind of seen as a disruptive model. What sort of gaps in the surrogacy, maybe agency industry or space were you trying to address? And how would you say that Nodal disrupts that common agency experience that GC specifically encounter?
So I think today we're still a disruptor. And I definitely think we're breaking the mold. We're just now popular. We have a lot of clients and we've had a lot of successful outcomes. And, we've had, a ton of babies as a result of Nodal being around for the last 3+ years. What we did at Nodal from the very earliest days was that we tried to attack accessibility. And we defined accessibility as really the unchecked price of surrogacy. As an attorney that surrogacy is almost subject to supply and demand economics. And that doesn't feel fair in healthcare, right? That's okay if we're talking about the price of a handbag or a car or some sort of material item. But all of a sudden, when it comes to a finite resource like finding a surrogate, we found that the cost of surrogacy continued to balloon as demand continued to grow. And specifically, when states like New York ended up with an employer-based benefit mandate, basically, if you work for a company that has 100 employees or more, your employer has to support you for your fertility journey. And as people found that embryos were cheaper to make and easier to make because they were less expensive because of insurance coverage, more and more people were demanding and commanding surrogacy services. Well, as we fast forward, Nodal has always said that let's attack accessibility from the cost side. So today we continue to be one of the lowest cost options for people out there. People can pay $500 a month to match with a surrogate, and when you ultimately do match, it's $15,000. The cost of a match is still well below what any of our competitors are doing. And Oh, by the way, we give you options for case management. You can do case management through heartbeat and discharge from your clinic. You can do case management all the way through the entire journey if you'd like till the end. We offer people optionality because we know that the cost of diapers and formula is a lot, and we want people to save those dollars. Most excitingly is we've fought really hard to be in network with the major fertility insurance companies. Those are things like Progeny and Carrot and Maven. And we have worked so incredibly hard to make sure that we have coverage so that our clients and our customers can make sure that the affordability of surrogacy is not a problem that they have with Nodal. We've also done some really disruptive things. We've put a lot of the control back into the hands of the surrogate. We let the surrogates pick their own price. They get to name what they want their compensation to be. We guide them, of course, so that they don't have a ridiculous assumption, and we guide them based upon their experiences and upon their geography and their history. But we actually guide them on what they can do, but we let them ultimately choose. And a la Bumble, the dating service, we let the surrogates pick who they want to work with. Now, this little change in the industry sounds revolutionary or annoying or weird, but it was needed. Because what happens today for those people who don't work in the surrogacy space, what you may not know is that intended parents typically make the first move. And intended parents select a surrogate that they want to work with. Well, I can tell you as a doctor that does a ton of surrogacy, and in fact, the average doctor in America does around 10 surrogacy cases a year, and I do 3 a week in my own practice. What I will tell you is that intended parents fall in love with every surrogate that they meet. Every surrogate they meet is the hero that they've been waiting for, because that is one step closer to having the family they've always dreamed of. So instead, what we found is that instead of having a surrogate who says, you know what, I don't like these intended parents. I don't connect with these intended parents. I don't jive with these intended parents. We've actually said to the surrogates, pick who you want to work with. Pick who you want to carry for. Pick who you think your dream surrogacy journey will be with. And at the end of the day, the relationship is stronger, the experience is better, and most importantly is the break rate on Nodal is less than 5% when the industry standard is nearly 20%.
Wow. Do you see any, just based off that thought, is like, do you see any, not pushback, but do the IPs ever have an expectation that they're going to be the ones who choose, or do you see that kind of playing out differently if you look at it from the IP perspective? Because I mean, that sounds amazing from the GC side, is to have that kind of control, that kind of first move, status, what they're doing. I'm just curious because that's so not typical of what we see in the industry. Do you have IPs who kind of say, well, wait a minute, why am I not in the driver's seat for this part of the process?
Totally. And that's totally fine. And you know what? There's 449 other amazing agencies in America. And we tell people, like, if that's what you need, if you need to be in control, then go to an agency that affords you the opportunity. But upon intake, we make sure that every intended parent understands the rules of working with Nodal. However, it's not for everyone. Some people are like, pick me. Why are they not picking me? And we sometimes guide them. And I cannot tell you how many times that we've actually had to help people recreate their profiles because we tell them their profile is just not working. Maybe they made it all about them and not using the word us. Maybe they made it about, social surrogacy, and we just don't have any surrogates who want to do social surrogacy. There's a million and one reasons. But at the end of the day, we find that the Nodal platform is really trying to break the mold. And what we have done is we've made it more affordable, more accessible. And by the way, the coolest aspect out there is that our average match time is 42 days.
That was going to be my next question, was like, do you see that impacting your match times? Because I have surrogates who get to me and they've been telling me, like, I've been waiting for almost a year to get matched, where I had a match break and then I'm finally getting started. And what are you seeing as the main driver for that kind of, systematic way of doing things where a surrogate's picking and then at the same time still having a match time of 42 days for IPs? Like, is there a secret sauce, but is it just something about how you are sort of curating the people who are coming in, or kind of just taking care of their profiles and guiding them? Or that just seems very, again, atypical from what, I see on the legal side for my GCs who get to me.
So the industry standard is 9 to 18 months. And what we tell people is that typically on the Nodal platform, expect to take as long as up to 9 months. But this 42-day thing is amazing. And this is because we have supply. And we know that supply drives everything. So we have a whole lot of intended parents and a whole lot of surrogates. So when a surrogate gets onto our platform, they see all these amazing intended parents right away with their profiles. They tend to pick them within the first few weeks. And even if something breaks for whatever reason, let's just say they pick someone and then it's not the right geography, or they get cold feet or something like that, they're still rematching rather quickly. But more importantly is people are not making it to the clinic and then breaking. Because, right, that's as you know, as a lawyer, like, that is the worst thing that can happen, is that when you have a match and you go down, you do all the contracting, and then you go to medical clearance, and then all of a sudden things just fall apart. So by having a fast matching process, it's not that we're sacrificing the quality of anyone's relationship. We're actually finding that it's a more robust relationship because people want to move fast, and we are moving fast with them.
Yeah. And I mean, on the surrogate side specifically, just knowing that you're kind of in charge of who you're picking next, right? Because like usually if you're waiting for IPs to pick you and they finally do, and then it breaks for whatever reason, and now you're waiting to get picked again, that may be another 6 or 9 months for them, which is kind of explains some of their delayed, their match times. But for you guys, if it does fall apart for whatever reason, they're right back there kind of searching profiles and deciding what they want to do. That is a different way of doing it. That's very cool. So I guess my next question would be, as terms of like the integration between Nodal and clinics or Nodal and your practice to make that such that you don't have things fall apart at the clinic, what are you guys doing to improve that screening or matching process so you don't have those clinical match breaks?
So Nodal today is the only agency in America that's started and run by a doctor. Mm. And for those people who know who I am or know my reputation, I don't move fast. I move slow and deliberately. And so what I mean by that is that I firmly believe in following the American Society for Reproductive Medicine's best practices. And so we meet and exceed every single ASRM criteria. So we are super selective in the surrogates that make it onto the platform. We are not for every surrogate. We make sure that those surrogates typically meet the CCRM criteria. And as you know, I'm a doctor at CCRM,
right,
which are some of the most stringent in America. So when our surrogates hit our platform, they glide through when they get to a clinic.
Okay.
And because of that frictionless experience, like people tend to attract like people. So their friends who are healthy, their friends who are wonderful, their friends who are motivated, we tend to see communities of people going through. With that said, surrogacy is a bumpy road and no one has it easy. And there are lots of bumps along the way. And so as we continue to move through this process, things pop up all the time. So for example, sometimes you have people who are anti-vaccination. And so that's something you really need to discuss with the intended parents. Sometimes you have people who are anti-termination, and that's something you need to discuss with the intended parents. Sometimes people live in a state where even though they might have the desire for A, they are incapable of having A because of the state they live in.
Right.
And that example would be if someone lives in Florida or Texas, and they were to have a pregnancy loss past 6 weeks, they might have a very hard time having a DNC and might have to travel for that. And so we actually need to prepare the intended parents for the potential of travel if, God forbid, they end up with a miscarriage or something like that. But in the end of the day, it's all about using science, technology, and understanding the rules of engagement. And if you follow the ASRM criteria and you follow the rules of the road, you tend to have a pretty frictionless experience across the way.
Yeah. And so, I mean, all that upfront work that you guys are doing before they even get into the platforms to be allowed to match is probably reducing a lot of that friction or a lot of those other kind of issues where it seems like other places tend to be kind of throw out a big net, see who we can get in, and then kind of filter them after they're there. And then that's when I tend to see a lot of these issues pop up with match breaks or just medical issues that, are discovered. But you guys are kind of eliminating that at the front end, so you don't see that as much once people are actually engaging on your platform.
You nailed it. Okay. The effort you put in the beginning is the frictionless experience you'll have on the other side. What you put in is what you get out. And so what we do is we do a high throughput medical record review of every single surrogate. We get every surrogate cleared by a maternal fetal medicine specialist. So actually they're already getting MFM clearance up front, even if it's not medically indicated, just right. Another set of eyes. We're putting together this proprietary one-page summary. So every clinic that we work with gets a Nodal summary of that surrogate, which is incredible. So instead of the clinic having to review a stack of papers, we give them one document that actually summarizes all of those things. So they can very quickly say yay or nay if she meets their criteria or not. And by the way, we've worked with so many clinics at this point that actually we know everyone's criteria. So if someone calls us up and says, one of my favorite practices, for example, is RPMG in Los Angeles. We already have the criteria that Dr. Wong likes to see with his potential surrogates. And we know that our potential surrogates have already been pressure tested against those criteria. And we also know that intended parents are not going to be matched with a surrogate who's not going to meet those criteria. So it's all about using technology to make sure that we're adhering to the medical standards of each individual clinic.
So Brian, with all that stuff that you've described, what would you say the overall experience is for a surrogate on Nodal? And are there any insights you would like to specifically talk about for surrogates specifically who are thinking about joining your platform?
So what's crazy is when we launched Nodal back in September of 2022, we thought we would talk to maybe a few hundred surrogates a year, maybe a few thousand. What we didn't realize is that as of today, we've spoken to nearly 30,000 surrogates. And we have had a huge amount of surrogates come to us to ask us, what is surrogacy? How's it work? What's the best practice? Sometimes people use us as their first stop along their journey, and that's okay. Because our entire goal at Nodal is to help improve the ecosystem and to help improve our entire profession. What I would say is that for the experience of a surrogate on Nodal, it's an empowering one. We are not the absolute soup to nuts, hand-holding experience of some other agencies, and that's okay. We're a small and mighty team. We offer people empowerment. We offer them the opportunity to name their compensation. We offer the opportunity for them to have control in the matching process. And in fact, we offer them insights into who they're working with and the clinic that they're going to be working with as well. With that said, what we find in general is that our Nodal experience has been amazing. We have a huge number of surrogates who come back to us, journey after journey, to ask for us to be their option for them to help others grow, start, or complete their families. Overall, what we have found is that the Nodal experience is rewarding. And for many women who are making the incredibly brave move to pursue surrogacy as their opportunity to help their own personal families, we advise them every single time that Nodal is incredibly grateful for their efforts and grateful to have them on this platform. Our strength is our surrogates. Our strength is also the team. And I just happen to be just one person who's part of this amazing team today that's helping to make surrogacy both cheaper, faster, and safer.
Well, with that, Dr. Levine, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you for what you and your team continue to do for surrogates who do join your platform or who stop by there on their way to their journeys. Thank you for all the work you do on the medical side of things as well. And just thank you for your time, for the insights you've been able to share. If you like this episode, please share it with your friends. You can find Dr. Levine at CCRM New York. He doesn't need an introduction. He's very well known on his own. But thank you for your time, Dr. Levine. I appreciate it.
Thank you again for your time, your attention, and most importantly, thank you to all the listeners who've tuned in today. So thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.